You're listening to Theater and College Hoops. I'm Subi. Alongside me is Taylor Dammel. We're brought to you by Dash Radio and the Barn Burner Podcast Network. Go subscribe on whichever device you use. I actually heard Ben Bentel, former forward for the Providence Friars, probably declared a little too early.
That's a safe assumption right there, I would say.
He was really good for the Friars, man.
For like a day and a half. Yeah, great name. Great name more than anything else.
At the very least, we got alliteration into the show, but he was really good for the Friars. Left for the NBA draft a little too early, some would say, but he subscribes, so you should as well. Check out the website at thebarnburner.com. That's the-barnburner.com. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at CBB Theater. You should also follow me at Subi232 to find out where the Theat is, and Taylor at Taylor Dammel. We're sponsored by Blue Note, artfully crafted small batch bourbon, distilled in Memphis and honoring the Memphis Blues. Be noteworthy, Memphis. We got some snow here today.
Oh,
actually, not some snow. It is blizzarding.
It's 77 degrees here in Scottsdale.
Fine.
Sorry, I don't know. Are you looking for fall weather? I mean, it is Halloween. So I guess fall weather, you need to have Halloween and fall weather. I mean, even we had a 43-degree morning here today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Whoa. Well, I had to wear a sweater to Starbucks. I'm wearing a sweater right now.
Look, man, I'm perfectly fine with the snow. I work from home, so it's not like I have to go back and forth, walk outside every single day. I get to enjoy this beautiful, fluffy white snow falling from the ground from the seat of my pants.
Just let it get plowed and everyone slip and fall before you get out there and really explore. So I like it. Are you guys going to be out exploring? Oh no, you're going to be in LA this weekend.
So we get the snow today, and then we leave for LA tomorrow night.
It's because you guys are really West Coasters, as much as you hate to admit it. You guys are West Coasters.
We're basically taking the entire month of November off. We're going to be on the West Coast. That being said, we will be back for obviously December and then January and then February. Probably March and April will be freezing too, but so we'll get our fair share.
Yeah. Oh no, it's true. It's true. The best part about living in a big city sometimes is your ability to travel out of it. And late December in Chicago, January maybe, might have to catch a flight somewhere real quick if things go south with the weather.
Yeah, but for now, I'm really enjoying the snow, reacclimating myself, having grown up in Boston. I really haven't had a snow day in, 10 years now?
11, yeah.
11 years?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like I'm getting off of work right now. I'm clearly still working. It's not really a snow day.
Right.
Snow day is synonymous with getting off of school or getting off of work. But
as someone who works from home, similar to myself, what are the requirements when it comes to taking a day off? Like, is it like snow? Like, it snows. Like it snowed. Let's say it snows a foot in Chicago. Can you just be like, oh, sorry, couldn't make it in today?
No, definitely not. They're like, so the snow impeded you from opening up your computer.
Right.
If the snow completely blew out my internet connection, that'd be the perfect excuse. But in terms of, I mean, I could potentially be like, well, I wasn't able to walk downstairs to my Starbucks and be one of those coffee guys. I can't start my day without my first cup of coffee.
I go to Starbucks every day, but I do hate those people. Like, I was an idiot before 11 a.m. because I didn't have coffee. Like, fuck off.
Yeah, that's not a valid excuse.
No,
don't give me that.
Agreed.
I think outside of snow, a real legitimate reason would be if I was deathly ill. Like deathly ill, because even if I'm just regularly sick, I probably won't work, but I'm not going to take any sick time. I'll open my laptop and show to other people that I'm working.
Here I am, connected. Okay.
Also, if any of my employers are listening to this, that's not true. This is someone filling in for Subi today.
And it's not during work hours. It's past normal work hours right now is when we're recording. 100%.
Correct.
Right.
That is 100% right. Awesome. So let's dive in. We got a great preview of the Big East today. One of our favorite conferences, maybe not of the last few years, but growing up, this was our bread and butter. Any college basketball fans, true bread and butter. The Big East right now for me just evokes so many memories. It's rife with nostalgia. Is the same with you?
Yeah, I think the Big East is really, as even if it doesn't have its traditional cast of characters like it did back in the day, I think the Big East is really back to being like Big East basketball. I think this is arguably the best conference in the country, along with the Big Ten. And I mean, you got a lot of studs in this conference. And the thing about the Big East, it's kind of similar with the Big Ten, but more so with the Big East. And this is kind of classic Big East basketball. Is you got a lot of old men playing. These aren't boys playing in the Big East. These are 22-year-old, sometimes older, playing in Madison Square Garden in the cold, grinding it out, elbowing each other in the head. I love it. I love Big East basketball. It's not, I could 100% understand why, say, the casual basketball fan wouldn't love a Big East brand of basketball, especially old school Big East brand of basketball. It's more of a grind it out type of basketball. But as a true traditional fan, I just love it. I love Big East basketball.
I think they've done a good job these past couple of years because a good job of trying to keep themselves afloat in the sense that the talent isn't the same as what it was mid 2000s, early 2010s, but they still play at Madison Square Garden. They have Gus Johnson and Bill Raftery calling those games, which I mean, if you don't think that makes a difference, it definitely does. I'd rather listen to a Big East game because Gus and Raft are calling it as opposed to like a Pac-12 game. I do love Walton. I do love Walton. Walton and Pash
I like Bill Pash. I like Bill Pash. Just Pash, how about
Dave Pash and Walton are cool, but the other ones like Matt Muehlbach and shit like that.
Roxy Bernstein.
Yeah, I don't need to hear those guys.
Actually, give me, and Gus Johnson especially, take him over half the ESPN guys doing like Big Ten basketball. Dan Dockich, get the fuck out of here. I don't. Yeah,
the worst.
No. Give me Gus Johnson. Give me Raftery. Give me a classic Big East matchup. Can't ask for much better than on a cold winter's night.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like during the day on a Saturday, right? Those guys,
whatever. Yeah,
those guys have been delivering great Big East calls for the past few years now. But additionally, keep playing those games in Madison Square Garden is huge. Big East matchup in MSG is the apex of college basketball because, for me at least, because it, like I said, evokes so many memories and brings up so much nostalgia. And so the conference last year and really the past 3 years has been carried by Villanova and their 2 titles in the last 3 years. They've been running this conference with an iron fist. Jay Wright in his sexy ass suits has been dominating this conference. And so I think more and more teams have gotten better. There's been a lot of turnover at the head coaching ranks. And so 4 teams made the tournament last year, but none of them really made it past the second round. This is the opposite of what happened with the Big Ten when we discussed them in our previous episode. The Big Ten had 9 teams last year, and they went 7-1 in the first round, whereas the Big East here only had 4, and none made it past the second round. In my opinion, Marquette being the absolute most disappointing because
100%.
They started out so hot with the Hauser brothers and Marcus Howard, and they lost to John Morant and Murray State. That was a very sexy 12/5 pick. I was an idiot. I went with the 5 seed in Marquette, but obviously we know how that happened. But regardless, the Big East was kind of down last year, and they didn't perform in the postseason.
Seton Hall lost to Wofford in the tournament last year as well.
Yeah, and we'll get to Seton Hall here, and I actually think there's one particular issue with that team last year that may carry over into this year. But first and foremost, we'll start, Taylor, with the Coach of the Year. Who you got coming out with Coach of the Year in the Big East?
God, so I have my notes in front of me, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 scribbles out of names of both the Coach of the Year and the winner of the conference. Some of the names have been scribbled out twice and then like rewritten. And so, like we said last year, only 4 teams made the tournament, but I'm much more bullish on the Big East this year for almost all the same reasons all the way around, like I just referenced. There are a lot of returners in this conference, a lot of people who have been in their system for a year, 2 or 3. And in college basketball, that usually means success, at least the ability to grind out games where other teams are still coming together. Now, that being said, my coach of the year is only in the 2nd season at his school, and I'm going with Javier's coach, Travis Steele. I think that his team, although they had a really slow start to last year, and they had kind of an awkward transition from Chris Mack to Travis Steele, I think his team is going to be the most improved team in this conference this year. They have so many returners, and they are big. They are big dudes, too. Let me roll into their lineup here. They've got nobody on their team that's going to be a starter is younger than a junior. They have 1 transfer in from Ohio, and that's Jason Carter. And everybody else on the team is a senior or a junior, and Carter's a redshirt junior. You've got Bryce Moore, who's a grad transfer as well, redshirt senior from Western Michigan. And they have the best name of any freshman that came into this conference, and that's Kai Tandy. And how can you not root for a guy like Kai Tandy?
How's that spelled?
Like KYKY.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're
Kai
right.
As much
I don't know
as
if it was like CHI or something.
No. So they have Big East Conference Player of the Year candidate in Najee Marshall. He's certainly going to be most likely a Big East all conference player. And so I am really, really bullish on a team like Xavier, who last year wasn't any good, at least not for the first half. They won 7 of their last 9 games last year. And so I think they're going to be much improved. And I think they're going to finish really high in the conference. I won't tell you where yet, but I think Xavier is going to finish really high in the conference compared to last year.
God damn it. Well, I have the exact same thing.
I have
Travis Steele.
Yeah, Travis Steele.
Yeah, and I guess we'll update the format. We'll go 1-1. But yeah, I got Travis Steele. What were you saying?
But I had Ed Cooley on this list. I had Kevin Willard on this list.
Mm-hmm.
I even had Patrick Ewing on this list.
Did Woj even cross your mind?
He did not.
I should say.
He did not. He did not, because although I think Marquette is a tournament team, they just lost too much from last year. I don't think they're going to finish ahead of Xavier. And I think if you look and say, okay, so Xavier's got a 2nd-year coach that finishes high in the conference, that's going to be where they're going to end up. My problem with, say, like a Jay Wright, for example, is it's just like we talked about in almost every one of these previews. Expectations are too high. He's won 2 national championships in the last four years. So if he doesn't reach that level again, he's not going to win Coach of the Year. And that's, whether that's right or wrong, that's just not going to happen.
Well, it's funny because we talk about those other coaches. We talk about Bill Self. We talk about the expectations with Izzo, Calipari, and Roy Williams, right? Coach K. But Jay Wright is actually the one with the most titles in recent memory out of all of these guys. Right?
Oh, yeah.
He's in the shortest amount of time. So Jay Wright is the one that you're completely correct. And again, it's voter fatigue. Jay Wright's, he's won all the accolades that he can. I think at this point, for him to win Big East Coach of the Year, he's going to need a team that's just god awful, which I don't think will happen with his recruiting ability and everyone wanting to go to Villanova in the Big East. But if his team was projected to finish somewhere in the middle of the pack towards the bottom end of the pack, and he has them as a tournament team or finishing top 3, that's when Jay Wright will get his Coach of the Year again.
Right. And I mean, agreed. I think we can say that, like not to beat a dead horse, but we can say that about most of the 15, let's call it, best coaches in this country, with Jay Wright as well with inside that top 5 coach in this country. And so it's just hard to continually prove to people, oh, this is how good I am. So that's why I went with Travis Steele, though. Kind of an up-and-comer, and I think his Xavier team, who returns a lot of people. They do have 5 freshmen, so their depth is going to be an issue, but their starting lineup is all old men. They all averaged more than 11 points a game last year. Now, obviously, Jason Carter wasn't with them last year, but they all averaged big numbers last year. They have good rebounders. Everybody in the starting lineup averaged more than 3 rebounds, and 4 of them averaged over 5 rebounds. You also have 4 guys who averaged over 2 assists last year, with 3 of those guys averaging over 3. So you just have a really solid squad that kind of found themselves at the end of last year, and I think that's going to continue to push into this year. So that's why I'm really high on Xavier and Travis Steele.
Yeah, as am I. And so you've made a lot of great points. I think the biggest one being that they finished off the season 7-9. And so this is the same thing that Brad Underwood did with his team, right? So he finished off the season very well, but started off poorly. And so I chose Brad Underwood as my coach of the year in the Big Ten. Travis Steele was able to help his team finish strong. He was only a first-year head coach. This obviously coming into his second year, he gets his 4 starters returning that you had mentioned, the best of which Najee Marshall, who very well could make one all Big East team. I don't know if it'll be first, probably looking at second all Big East. And I actually think, so I know you're not going to say where you think Xavier is going to finish in the Big East table. I think that they're going to be a top 4 team.
I would, yeah, they are,
and that may not
be
mind. That may not be going out on a limb for the amount of teams in the Big East.
No, they're ranked 19th in preseason, so which is 3rd. So
right, so
right,
I like where Xavier's headed this year, but I think just generally speaking, as a program, this is what Xavier does. They get quick turnarounds, and they have now a proven track record of hiring the correct coach. They hired Sean Miller. They hired Chris Mack, right? And now they have Travis Steele, who is still relatively unproven. But Sean Miller and Chris Mack have now gone on to do really good things for big-time programs. We're expecting a lot now this year with Chris Mack. Xavier just knows how to identify these coaches to get them back on the right track. And it's almost unfortunate because it is a good coaching job, Xavier is. It's not one of the top 10 or anything like that, but it's a good college basketball coaching job, in my opinion, because it's strictly a basketball school. And the people that they get in go on to get poached by some of these other bigger name schools.
Right. It's interesting, too, because the coaches, we generally see coaches poached after like 2 or 3 years. These Xavier coaches are poached after like 6 or 7 years, 8 years.
I think really it's the
interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting because Chris Mack has had a lot of national notoriety for a long time as a Xavier coach. And I think what the problem is Xavier is a program that is are they a second tier college job, or are they a third tier?
They're probably one of the highest third tier college jobs.
Right.
That's where I'll give them.
They're borderline second. They're like a top 30 job.
Yeah.
In the right.
I'd put them top 30.
And so the problem is I think Xavier coaches continue to coach there for a long time, and they continue to churn out appearances in the tournament, except for last year, but appearances in the tournament, and in every so often like Sweet 16, and every so often Sweet 16. And it's the same thing, just because we know Sean Miller so well. It's the same thing that happens with Sean Miller, and the same thing happened with Chris Mack and Thad Matta before that. And that is,
how did I forget Thad Matta, by the way?
Yeah, right.
Holy shit.
And that is, the ceiling is Elite 8, maximum peak of the A-frame ceiling is
which is pretty good for a small school like Xavier.
It is, because it's really just tough. It's not tough to pull good recruits. It's tough to pull great recruits. So what we see, and I think what Xavier's best quality when it comes to finding these coaches is you have really good developers and you have really good coaches who have an eye on the diamond in the rough type of recruit. And we see that over and over and over again at Xavier. And they are a really underrated program as a whole. Almost like when we talked about in the Big Ten preview that Purdue is a really underrated, consistent program in this country. Xavier is similar to that, just with a little less success than a school like, say, Purdue. But they still have just, now if you look, Thad Matta was the coach there 20 years ago without looking.
Three coaches?
Yeah, right. And so for a non-high major program, that's a really consistent coaching track record.
That's the crucial part of it right there. We had mentioned that they're probably within that top 30, probably closer to the 20 to 30 range that we're referencing. But the fact that they didn't make the tournament last year, and it was kind of a shock / disappointment to their fans and even to us, you kind of look at yourself and say, oh shit, Xavier's not even in the field of 64. What happened this past year? And then you kind of look and you realize, oh, that's right. Chris Mack left, Travis Steele's in his first year of coaching. And it's pretty impressive, the turnaround job that Steele has already done. And I think it's just instilling confidence in his guys. And so I'm very excited to see what he does with Xavier. I think they're going to be back on the up and up. And like I had said, finish top 3, top 4 within the conference.
They have the second best recruiting class in the Big East. And I guess before we move on here, would you say that Xavier is arguably the second best job in the Big East? Or would you put, like, Nova's the first, obviously, or would you put like Georgetown maybe ahead of them?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's just, first of all, I think between you and me, we have different philosophies when it comes to this type of question, because I mean, it's taken me now a couple more years of Miami's ineptitude, but when you ask, do you think Miami football is a good coaching job? I'll be like, yes, it absolutely is. Maybe not so much now, but when we had this conversation 3-4 years ago, even when they were struggling, I was saying to myself, yeah, it still is a great coaching gig because of the history and because of all the all-time talent that has gone through there. You say the same thing about Georgetown with Patrick Ewing, Allen Iverson, Alonzo Mourning. Those are just the guys that come straight to mind. There's a lot more. And so I would even put Providence above them. So
interesting. Okay.
Nova, Providence, and Georgetown, and not in that particular order. Let me think.
This would be a good episode just in itself, by the way.
Yeah.
Note this, what our top 30 jobs are in the country or whatever. But I think, I don't know. I think there's an argument though to be made that, and this is exactly where we differ.
UConn's coming back, but Syracuse also, Syracuse. Or if Syracuse is in the ACC, fuck me.
Yeah, right. What are you talking about? Yeah. Well, we'll get to that whole difficulty when it comes to our starting 5 of this conference. Because
that's true. So much
that
realignment.
was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
But I even if you don't agree with me that they are second, they're not first. We know Villanova is easily the number 1. I think that there's at least an argument to be made that say, hey, this is probably the second most successful current Big East school of the last 2 decades, and Marquette could be in there too.
I'd agree.
There's an argument there, and I think if maybe Xavier doesn't have a monster national presence, but I think if you go into that Ohio, that MEAC country, I guess if we may, they do have a lot of presence in that area, especially because Cincinnati is it's a big enough town in a big enough metro area to have some local talent in it as well. And you obviously got to recruit against Cincinnati itself, but I think they have a big enough presence in that area that will continue to be an upper echelon Big East school. And if you don't think it now, maybe in the next decade again with Travis Steele, they'll even move up to maybe the surefire second best job in that conference.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could definitely make the case for Xavier in terms of their success over the past decade or so, but
two decades,
sure.
Yeah.
But a lot of that, some of that damage was also done in the A10. So again, conference realignment.
Yeah, and then Marquette.
They have been to 2 Elite 8s under 2 different coaches, which not a lot of other teams can say.
Right. Well, and that's where this conference realignment is really difficult because Marquette, you've got that argument. Well, Dwayne Wade didn't play in the Big East, and then you've got Butler went to Final Fours as a Horizon League team. And so, yeah, it's tough to where you want to fall in line of how we think of these jobs, what their success means to, it's almost just like any conference realignment team. I think like a Colorado in football, as it relates to the Pac-12, is a good analogy for a team like Georgetown. Colorado had awesome football teams in the Big 12 back in the day. But that we don't, as Pac-12 fans, we don't relate to that at all because that they just weren't like Cordell Stewart was 15 years before they joined the Pac-12. So I don't really think of them as their football history. So I wonder if we asked true Big East fans what they think about the Marquette and Butler history and even Xavier history and how it relates to how they frame the history of the conference itself.
Yeah, I think for my money, Villanova, Providence, and Georgetown, they seem to be really the elder statesmen of the Big East. Maybe even you could say St. John's, Seton Hall, maybe as well. But I mean, look, and I'll say this name again later in the episode, but Dave Gavitt, Providence guy, literally invented the Big East. So that's why I'm going to have to put Providence in that top tier as well.
Okay.
Give me your player of the year.
So it really came down to two people. And we know who those two people are, and that's Marcus Howard, and that's Miles Powell.
I'm fingers crossed that you chose the other guy.
I picked Marcus Howard.
Oh, you're looking for a reaction? That's great news.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I was like, pause. Okay. So I picked Marcus Howard simply due to the fact that without the Hauser brothers, he has a huge load on his back now. Marcus Howard is going to make or break that entire team's season this year, in my opinion. And that's not like going out on a limb or anything. I actually think that Marquette is a good team, and I think they're going to make the tournament simply because they have someone who is a potential All-American on their roster. He averaged 25 points a game last year. They have a big transfer from Utah State, and his name is Kobe McEwen. He should help in that backcourt. My problem with Marquette is, as a whole, is there's a lot of unknowns on Marquette. They lost their second and third best player, who would have taken them. We could be talking about Marquette winning this conference if the Hauser brothers would have stayed, and then maybe as having like outside Final Four aspirations. And now we're talking about them as I have them as like the fourth or fifth best team in the conference. And that's only because they have Marcus Howard. And so that's why Marcus Howard is my player of the year. Senior guard, 25 points a game last year. I cannot see any reason as to why he's not going to score 25 points or more a game this year unless everybody else in the roster just ends up not being good, which is a complete a complete possibility. And I would say that he's gonna, unless he gets triple teamed, he's gonna win the Conference Player of the Year. Although there is an exact argument for Miles Powell, almost a similar sense, but Miles Powell's supporting cast is going to be better, and they're going to be a better team than Marquette, and they're going to go further than Marquette in the tournament and all of that. So Miles Powell is also a All-American candidate, and I don't know if both of these guys have the opportunity to be All-Americans at the same time, because they're both going to be doing very similar things. But there's an outside opportunity. If Marquette actually is good, then they both could be All-American. And because what a backcourt that would be, Miles Powell and Marcus Howard.
Why don't you look at John Rothstein's Instagram, because he has both of those guys on his All-American team. Both of those guys.
Well, if let's say both these guys score like 26, 27 points a game, how do you keep those?
Can't.
Because then they're both tournament teams. Seton Hall is going to be a really, really good team. They're ranked number 12 in the preseason rankings. Not that preseason rankings mean anything, but I think there's that opportunity that they both could be there. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if voters at least for the All-American side of things from a national perspective, split votes between them and only one of them make it as the first team All-American. But I could see it both happening. So I think those are the only two guys that have the opportunity to win this award.
Oh, absolutely. And so I think that plus the fact that they also have a chance at getting on the All American team makes this race for Player of the Year the best out of all the power conferences,
I
in
would
my
agree.
opinion.
I would
Marcus
agree.
Howard versus Miles Powell. These are two alphas on their team that are going to get you 25 plus points every single time they step out onto the field, onto the court. Excuse me. This is like the complete opposite of the Big Ten, where it's already Cassius Winston's before he even dribbles the ball for the first game of the season. So I'm excited for this matchup between the two. And the reason, in addition to all the reasons that we just gave out, is the amount of scoring that's going to be done. It's not like these guys, like Cassius Winston isn't going to get you 25 points plus. He is just a solid point guard who's going to do everything. But these guys are an entertainment like factory right now. They are these two guys are just going to play an incredibly fun brand of basketball. That being said, I went with Miles Powell because of his I don't know, ability to just score, which Marcus Howard can do as well. But Marcus didn't do that in a big time situation last year, and I suppose neither did Miles. But Miles Powell is a finalist for a Wooden Award, Naismith, even shooting guard of the year, All American, averaged 23 last year, and I think that's actually going to increase with a better roster around him. The only thing that I'm afraid of is Kevin Willard. Kevin Willard, in my estimation, is kind of like he's the Big East version of Mark Turgeon. Is kind of how I see it. Like he's
suspended for the first 2 games of the year.
Yeah, I saw that. I think it's only 2 games for.
Oh, one is an exhibition. Excuse me.
Yeah,
so
which
the
is
first,
fine.
Whatever, first game of the year.
But what was that for? That was for tampering, right?
Tampering with Torian Thompson from Syracuse.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whatever. Hey, good for Willard. He's trying to get nitty gritty, but
who ended up on the team.
Yeah, so a real punishment for him.
All right.
But I mean, Miles Powell, I think I don't want him to get hindered by Kevin Willard. I think Wojo is a better coach than Willard is, and I think that might help Marcus Howard. But for Powell, I think a big difference that he has, and potentially an advantage, is that he played with Team USA in the Pan Am Games this offseason.
Right.
And he's got that international experience. He has those extra games under his belt. And so he was able to go up against players that potentially could be better than the competition he's going up against the Big East. But this right here is a coin flip, man. Like you said, it was between Howard and Powell, but I'm going to go Miles this year because I think Seton Hall will ultimately be the better team, and I think he's going to have slightly better stats than Marcus.
Sure. I mean, their stats are so similar.
23,
4-3, 25, 4-4. I mean, it's really splitting hairs, and I'd like to offer some insight analysis with some really deep numbers as to why one was going to win over the other. But there isn't any to produce a real prediction of who's going to be better. And I think your prediction is completely valid in saying they're going to be the better team.
Yep.
He's going to win the guy. And I think my argument is saying he's going to have to do more. And if Marquette's good, it's going to be because he's good. It's an equally valid argument.
It is. I just foresee, and this is the way MVP voting goes, right? Like we look at Harden versus Antetokounmpo last year. The Bucks were the best team in all of basketball record-wise. So, and that may not be the best example because Giannis, I think, was better than Harden.
Sure.
But the Rockets fans are going to be saying, "Oh, it's only because he's on a winning team." Well, I think that carries weight with a lot of voters, and that's why I think Miles Powell, who has, in my opinion, a significantly better squad than Marquette.
Right.
But I mean, if Howard can take Marquette to the tournament, though,
I think he's going to. I think he's going to.
You know what's going to happen, Taylor? This is exactly what's going to happen. Miles Powell is going to win Big East Player of the Year, but he's not going to be on. He's not going to be on the All-American roster. Marcus Howard's going to be on the All-American roster. He's not going to win Big East Player of the Year, and people are going to be like, "How is that possible?"
One of those old voter switcheroos. Yeah. Well, I think there's an argument to be made that Marcus Howard is a more well-known commodity nationally than Miles Powell is. I think Marquette, simply because of some of the successes they've had over the last 10 to 15 years, is a little more of a nationally well-known program than Seton Hall. Than Seton Hall. Seton Hall is very much a Northeastern type of program, whereas Marquette is kind of middle of the country, and I think they have a little more reach. And so I think even just that alone might just produce one or two more votes for a guy like Marcus Howard. As we know, though, there is a large Eastern voter contingent when it comes to college basketball and these awards. So, yeah, I mean, I like I said, hate to beat a dead horse here, but we could have made the same argument about either. Yeah,
complete toss up. But I will say I am all on the Miles Powell train, man. I fucking love this guy.
I'm on both their if I could be on both of their trains at the same time, right? Yeah. Those Seton Hall Marquette games are going to be must-watch TV. Give me Gus Johnson. Give me Marcus Howard. Give me Miles Powell.
I want everyone on the court to get that absolute fuck out of the way, by the way. Like, I need this to be ISO basketball back and forth. Don't even set a screen. Just get out, like, go sit down.
So I talked about how big Xavier's program is, their height is, and really I meant that their guards are big. Their starting lineup isn't big as a whole. Seton Hall's lineup is big. They have 7-footer, 6'10". They have like an NBA height on their roster. They have a 7'1" guy on the bench. Not that he's not any good, Romero Gill, but they've got some real height. They have Torian Thompson, who's also 6'10". He's going to be coming off the bench most likely. So they've got some height on that team, and that alone might lend itself to Miles Powell getting one or two more looks on the offensive end after they grab some offensive rebounds, or one or two more easy buckets a game to get to one of their big guys down low, and just maybe one more assist per game than Marcus Howard might win that award.
It's going to be critical, and I do think that his surrounding cast members are going to be helpful in him winning the award. But I think this is a great segue into our regular season champ, and I'm actually going to kick it off. I think I'm so bought into Miles Powell. I think Seton Hall will win the Big East, actually. So this came down for me to Villanova, and it came down to Seton Hall. And so I was saying to myself, do I want to bet against Jay Wright? Do I want to bet against goddamn Connor Gillespie? I think that is it Connor Gillespie? No, he was the baseball player, wasn't he? It's like a Ryan Arcidiacono 2.0. I think they actually have
Colin Gillespie.
God damn it. Like Villanova is actually, if I was a member of the Big East, I would hate Villanova just for the amount of success and like their point, whatever. But I'm going to go with Seton Hall. Aforementioned Miles Powell, he is their proverbial bell cow. He's going to be the guy that's shooting every big time shot and giving them the most production. Big thing for me, though, is that they bring back 9 of their top 10 rotation players and 8 out of 9 scorers. That's the biggest thing. Veteran leadership, guys that have tasted success before. That was my only apprehension with Illinois. Illinois brings back a lot of these players, but they haven't really tasted success. Seton Hall had one of their best years last year. Obviously didn't work out in the tournament, but these are guys that have proven during the regular season that they can produce. And so now they're going to want to take that step further, and who better to do it with than potentially the best shooting guard in the entire country in Powell. So they have a lot of experience coming back. You had referenced how big they are. I'm going to point out one transfer from Florida State, 7-footer Ike Obiagu. Mm-hmm. So huge get for Willard for that interior defense, and they are quite large. But Florida State seems to always recruit these monstrous, like 7'2" guys that cannot do anything.
Where are they coming from?
I don't know, but they cannot do anything except for be huge, which is a commodity in college basketball. They just can't score. So that's a big get for him. I hate to harp on it, but this is going to come down to Kevin Willard. And so I personally think the Miles Powell effect will supersede the mismatch in coaching between Jay Wright and Kevin Willard. So Kevin Willard has the guys now. He has the dudes. He has the horses. You got to go win this Big East title, and you need to go ahead and snatch it away from Villanova, who I think a lot of people, despite, again, still kind of being down, plan to win this conference. So I got the regular season champs for Seton Hall, based on Miles Powell doing majority of the work, but also they're returning a lot of their core guys from last year.
So to kind of echo off that same statement, they are bringing back 85% of their minutes played last year. And they're bringing back 87% of their scoring, which is the second highest amount in the country behind Colorado's 94% of their scoring that they're returning. So that's worth something in college basketball. I could see Seton Hall winning this conference, but to beat this Kevin Willard dead horse, I could see this team not being well coached and really falling short of expectations a lot. To me, they have one of the highest ceiling, lowest floors of any of the teams that we have thought about for any of the conferences in winning the conference. So that being said, my debate between my winner of this conference was between three teams. And that one of them was Xavier and the other was Villanova, and I went with Seton Hall as well. And the reason I went with Seton Hall is the same reason that I couldn't pick Xavier and tell you about all of the returners and how good I think they're going to be because they're returning so much talent that they're old guys, and then not pick Seton Hall because it's the same exact reasoning. So I couldn't just do one and then tell you that the one team was gonna lose the conference for the same reason. Couldn't do that. So I really what put it over the top for me though is arguably Villanova's best recruit, Brian Antoine, still hasn't practiced yet. He was arguably going to be a starter on that team and maybe arguably the best freshman on that team, a team that has a lot of unknowns because they don't return a lot of talent from last year. And so they have the best recruit in the conference in Jeremiah Robinson Earl. He's a forward, stud, went to IMG Academy. They have another guard from DeMatha, Justin Moore, who looks like he's going to be a starter for that team as well. But when Brian Antoine comes back, if he comes back, because just the other day, Jay Wright said that still a possibility that he might redshirt. I mean, Brian Antoine is the type of guy that is not a first team all-conference selection, but he could be a third to second team all-conference selection. He's that good. Same with Jeremiah Robinson Earl. But so for me,
real quick before you dive into Seton Hall, what's going on the past 2 years with these high-profile recruits for Villanova? You got Javon Quinterly last year, who barely saw the floor. He's transferred now at Alabama, can't play this year, and now this latest disaster.
Well, I tell you what, that is going to be the problem with this team. Is if Javon Quinterly would have worked out to be the stud that he was anticipated to be, this would be far and away the team that I would have picked to win this conference. Because you would have had returning guards in Connor Gillespie or Colin Gillespie. God damn it, Subi.
Sorry,
Colin Gillespie and Javon Quinterly, who last year was 5-star recruit, thought of as the next great Villanova point guard. Now you have 2 or 3 freshmen that are really, really good, and they have the far and away the best recruiting class of this conference. They have a great name in Sadiq Bey. I love that. Could be an R&B singer's name, Sadiq Bey.
Oh, don't forget Cosby Roundtree either.
Oh yeah, Demir. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and of course, the biggest point or the biggest thing to talk about for Villanova's team this year, and they're going to win this conference next year, for sure. Going to win the conference in 2020-21, and that's because they have another Arcidiacono on the team, Chris Arcidiacono.
He's already there. I thought this was going to take another year or so.
Nope, he's on the roster. So you know.
God damn it.
So you know that team is winning the conference next year.
Yeah.
So 1 year from today, when we preview the Big East again, I don't see any way, shape, or form that Villanova is not going to be the far and away best team in this conference. There's just a lot of unknowns to me this year, especially with someone like Brian Antoine being hurt and maybe not even playing. So that's why I went with Seton Hall. Because as we said, they are big and they are old as shit. Like, these guys are ready to retire from the NBA already. That's how old they are. And so I couldn't get around, despite the fact that I am not a Kevin Willard believer, that they have the least variables of any of the teams in this conference. And that, in a nutshell, to me, has always been what Big East basketball kind of is. Like we said when we started this podcast, old men grinding out wins in the cold in the Northeast. And that's, for me, you have a star in Miles Powell, and you have a big surrounding cast of old guys who are huge. And that's going to be what wins this conference in my mind. But that being said, this is still a 10 seed that lost to Wofford in the first round of the tournament last year. There's no reason that Villanova, if all of their freshmen work out, can't win this conference as well. And my argument that for Travis Steele being the coach of the year would be that he is literally just a better coach than Kevin Willard, and he brings his team together along more quickly than Willard could.
Oh, yeah. Willard's been in charge for 10 years, and it's like the past 2 years have been the only time we've heard about Seton Hall.
Well, yeah, you think, okay, so they're in one of the best recruiting grounds in the country. They are a kind of old school, classic college basketball school. There's a reason why they are not good and haven't been good for years. And where it's a top-down, it's always a top-down thing in college basketball. And that is coaching down through the players. And there's an argument to be made that this team isn't even as talented as their team from 2 or 3 years ago.
Sure.
And they didn't do anything either. So I think I see this team as the highest ceiling and lowest floor of any of the teams considered in that top 4 of the conference, in my opinion.
It's going to be interesting, man. This is the Big East has a lot of intrigue. I'm still only tuning in, or I shouldn't say only tuning in, but mostly tuning in for Miles Powell versus Marcus Howard.
Right.
That is going to be circled on my calendar. Hopefully, I don't know how many times they play, but hopefully twice.
Big East games are going to be the classic sitting there watching, trying to explain to your girlfriend why the game is 53-52 and there's been 153 fouls called during the game.
And I love it.
Yeah, I love it. So you got to grind it out, okay?
Dwayne Wade, I love it.
Yeah, hey, fall down 8, get up 9. So I think that there's going to be a couple surprise teams in this conference. I think a team like Georgetown, because I really like James Akinjo. I really like Mac McClung. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, once we get to our starting 5, if we are still somehow doing this in like 10 years, Mac McClung is going to be on my starting 5.
Yeah, we're going to pencil him in there, right?
Mac McClung is so sick. That's also who I'll be tuning into.
Can we pick active players in our all-time starting 5?
Yeah, if you want.
Sophomores, no less.
It's just McClung's in a tough conference, man, because the starting 5, I think, of who we're going to get to, there's just too many names. And McClung's awesome, and he hasn't really done anything, but I hope he does.
So, I think a big key to Georgetown's success is going to be Omer Yurtseven, transfer from NC State. It's a guy that I followed for a long time because he was an Arizona recruit.
I remember
4 years
him.
ago. Yeah, yep. From Turkey is where he's from. And he's a big dude, 7-footer. And you would think with someone like Patrick Ewing as your head coach, that if you got a 7-footer, you might be able to know how to use him. He's a big enough, talented enough guy. I'm not saying he's like some stud, all-star type of talent, but I feel like he's going to be the key factor to take Georgetown to being maybe a surprise team in this conference. And I have them making the tournament as well. I have how many teams do I have making? I have 7 teams from the Big East making the tournament. It's Nova, Hall, Javier, Marquette, Providence, Georgetown, and my boys in Omaha.
Creighton.
That's
a lot of teams, man. That's 16 teams between this and who else did you say? The Big 12?
Correct.
That's a lot of teams.
Big 10.
Was it Big 10? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because I have the Big 10 or the Big the Big 12 and the ACC probably having one less.
Less, yeah.
So they have to come from somewhere. I think that a team like it's interesting when you look at this conference because we've not to belabor this point, but every team just has so many returners, and those almost always means in college basketball that their team gets better and notably better. You look at all of the mid-major. Let's take mid-major schools for example. You look at when North Dakota States of the world make the tournament. You look at their roster. It's all seniors and juniors, right?
Even their best player, like a guy like Mike Daum, South Dakota State.
Right. You look at all these guys, and rarely is it Steph Curry's of the world who came in there and all of a sudden just started lighting the world on fire as like a freshman and sophomore.
Right.
You got guys that have been there forever, have stuck in the system forever, and so that reigns true throughout college basketball. Though you have to have some kind of continuity if you want to be successful. I think that even though we are still in the one and done era of college basketball, we're on the backslide of the one and done era in college basketball because these teams who have all the one and done talent aren't real. They're making it to the top, but they're not winning anything.
Well, let's look at the last 4 national title winners, right? Virginia. Come on.
Juniors and seniors.
Juniors and seniors. 2 Villanova teams. Pretty
juniors
much
and
juniors and seniors.
Right.
And then that Carolina team was led by Joel Berry.
Right. Senior. So, right. I mean, we could go back to college basketball, and obviously this would be true. There was a little era there of the really good Duke and Kentucky teams of those early 2010s, right? And that was kind of the prime era of the one and done.
Yeah, I think it was like Anthony Davis and then Jahlil Okafor. So that's
right.
true.
And
those were all freshmen.
And so I think there's a lot of reasons that you can even look to, like a team like Butler, who was awful last year, and just look at them and go, well, shit, they return about damn near everybody. Why wouldn't they be better this year? But that's why I think as a whole, this entire conference is going to be notably better as a whole, not just as an umbrella statement, but just as a quality of game on a night-to-night basis. This team is going to have a lot of players who have played at least a year or two in the Big East now and understand what is going on in the conference. Now, another reason why I think Georgetown has the ability to surprise some folks in the conference is they have the toughest strength of schedule in the out-of-conference or non-conference games. So that is going to give them a good indication early, good test. Whereas, you look at a St. John's last year. St. John's was 12-0 heading into conference play last year.
Nobody really believed in them.
Right. And they tanked out once they got into conference play.
They were, they did beat. Oh, no, they came close to beating Villanova, but I was going to say that they tanked out in the first round, the play-in game against ASU.
Right.
Quite literally one of the worst shooting performances I've ever seen from Mustafa Heron.
Right.
And who else am I thinking of? Their other stud, I forget, but terrible.
Shamari
Pons, thank you. They were both awful.
If you can tank out and still make the tournament, that's what they did last year. So I think Georgetown is going to be opposite this year. I think we're going to see them as something like a 7-4 and out of conference play, 8-3. But then they surprise a couple teams in conference because they would have had the toughest schedule leading up to that. So
Ewing's made them competitive too. Like Patrick Ewing, the reason why they're getting these difficult out of conference games, I feel like that is the Ewing effect.
Right. So did you consider our boy Ed Cooley at all for
Coach of the year? Thought about it. I actually so he's got a all conference player in Alpha Diallo.
Yeah.
And then they also have fuck it, I'm gonna make the joke. The Grand Wizard David Duke. They do have a player on their team named David Duke. That's very unfortunate for him. He is black. But regardless, I love Ed Cooley, man. I think he is, and we'll get more from our special guest later today. But Ed Cooley is like is such a player's coach. But I didn't think that he was going to win Coach of the Year because I think for Cooley to win Coach of the Year, he's somewhere in between a Jay Wright and a Travis Steele in terms of expectations. His expectations aren't super high like Jay Wright's, which is national title, but they're not as low as Travis Steele's. Like he's been doing this gig for far more than 2 years, which is what Steele has under his belt. Actually, just 1 year. So I think Cooley is somewhere in between, and he needs to win the Big East title. If he wins the Big East title, regular season title, I'll give it to him. Like, I think he'll have deserved it. But Travis Steele, if he can get his team to a top 3 type of finish, and if let's say if it goes like this, Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say if it goes Seton Hall, Nova, Providence, right? Then I think it's definitely between Kevin Willard and
Ed Cooley?
Travis Steele.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah,
so if it goes Hall, Nova, Xavier, it's between those 3.
Yeah. Right. And that's kind of why, going back, that's why I picked Travis Steele in the first place as my coach of the year. Right. So they do have a really big transfer there. They want Pipkins from UMass. He averaged 16 points a game last year. Another grad transfer. And just, I hate to say it again, but just another old squad there for Providence. Redshirt senior, sophomore, senior, junior, senior. So, you just got another team that's an old team. They're not very big. Luann Pipkins is only 5'11". But that's not necessarily here nor there in college basketball. They're going
to play. Sorry, real quick. Providence is going to play spoiler to a lot of teams like Marquette and maybe no. So not Marquette, but Seton Hall, Nova. The Dunk is a very difficult place to play basketball, and so I could see a team that's kind of on a roll tripping up against Providence.
Do you have any prediction on how many teams from this conference make the tournament? So if I have 7, are you saying that you are thinking that there's going to be less than that?
I think I'm looking at 5 or 6.
Okay. So you're only maybe looking at one more team than last year when they had 4. I think that this conference has to have gotten better just from all the returners alone to get more than just one more team than last year into the tournament.
Yeah, I want Georgetown to make the jump. I'm just a little wary on that. So, but
they're kind of like the hot pick to be the surprise team, even in the country. They're like the hot pick, but we know how that always works out. That works out by they lose 4 of their first 5 games in conference, and then everybody forgets about them.
Yeah, I think my 3 biggest 2 of them are absolute locks in Seton Hall and Nova. And then I'll throw Xavier right behind them. Xavier and PC, Providence. So that's 4 right there. Yeah, and then I'll say Georgetown. But that's about it for me. I don't know if Marquette makes the tournament.
You don't think Marcus Howard can bring them to the?
Okay, I'll give it to him 6, and that's a stretch for me.
Okay.
So it's either a stretch with Marquette or Georgetown. So. I'm gonna go a strenuous 6.
I think you're really undervaluing Creighton. Then I would argue some people
most likely,
yeah, right. I think some people have them as a top 30 team in the country. They have 4 guys that average over 10 points a game that are coming back. And Tyshawn Alexander, who averaged 16 points a game last year, he's a potential all-conference type of player. You have Marcus Zagorowski, great name. He averaged 10 points a game last year. They have a kind of a smaller roster. You're going to have 4 guys starting that are under 6'5", and then with their center Jacob Epperson in the middle, he's 6'10", but he's kind of I don't want to say he's a nothing player, but he's just kind of there. The other guys are the scorers. They do have a big transfer from Southeast Missouri who averaged 19 points a game, and that's Denzel Mahoney. And another senior, 6'11", Kelvin Jones, transfer from Idaho State Bengals, who averaged 10 points a game up there in Idaho last year.
Here's my thing, though.
Pocatello, Idaho. My sister got her grad degree from Idaho State, so shout out Pocatello, Idaho.
That's the Vandals, right?
No. Idaho is the Vandals. The Idaho State Bengals.
Oh, my fault.
Pocatello might be the worst city in this otherwise great country, but I think you're underrating a team like Creighton, who has only 2 freshmen joining this roster, and I think that they're going to be a little better than anticipated. I think it's going to be between Georgetown and Creighton as my 7th team from this conference that makes the tournament.
Then that's fine. Then I'll sub out Marquette. I just don't think all 3. If you tell me Creighton, Marquette, and Georgetown are all making the tournament, I will say that you're a liar. I think 2 of those teams get in.
Okay.
And so it very well may be, I don't know who the odd man out is just yet, but I'm leaning towards Creighton because, to be brutally honest, those transfers don't mean shit to me because they played in no-name conferences with no-name teams. That's I mean that's just me being honest, right? So a guy like Ike Obiagu, who probably can't do anything on a basketball court, but is 7 feet and has played in the ACC, played at Florida State, I'm going to have more faith in to protect the interior because he's been going up against the likes of like goddamn Zion Williamson, right? And some other guys. So it's going to be. So we should write this down. You say 7 teams, I'll say 6.
Yeah.
The line is at 6.5. I'll take the under.
Okay. I'm taking the over. And really it has a lot to do with that. I think if I'm rolling with my theme of returners and then also Marcus Howard being the player of the year, then obviously they can't miss the tournament if he's not the player of the year. And then if I think this conference is going to be so much better as a whole because they have so many returners, then I think that they're going to almost double the amount of tournament teams they had last year, just simply because of all the new coaches that came in last year are not new anymore. And all the new players that came in last year are not new anymore. We have very few freshmen in this conference. Providence has 1 freshman on the whole team. And that's crazy in this world of college basketball that we live in now, where the turnover is so high. Villanova is the only team that has like freshmen in this conference that are any good.
Which is kind of funny to say when you talk about Villanova, right? Because they're typically the ones with the experience, and it's not like they don't have talent. They had a top 10 guy go with Mikal Bridges, and obviously a first rounder in DiVincenzo. But this is a team that you're accustomed to building off the backs of leadership, senior, junior, like Eric Paschal, like a Phil Booth, like a Jalen Brunson. So the Big East is going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. Travis Steele, we both have as our coach of the year. You have Marcus Howard for player of the year. I have Miles Powell, and we both have the Hall for regular season champ. And I am in agreement with you that's me putting a lot of faith in the Hall and Kevin Willard. Like, don't fuck this up, man. Do not compromise my love.
Well, this is a classic example of if you don't do it now, then when.
Yeah, windows shut.
Like, this is if you're Seton Hall, it's tough. This is going to be a team that if they're not really good this year and they don't live up to expectations, they're going to be constantly stuck in the middle. It's going to be, do we fire Kevin Willard even though he has put some good teams out there? Or do we get rid of him? Because you can't get rid of him after, say, a Sweet 16 or whatever, because there's going to be some Seton Hall fans who are like, well, wait, when are we ever better than this?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But then you're going to have some who go like, no, this guy has reached his ceiling. We can't get over the top with this guy. If we can't get over the top with a National Player of the Year candidate and a bunch of 23-year-olds around him, then when are we ever going to do it?
Insult to injury as well, and it happens with a lot of players, but it's kind of a wasted year for Miles Powell because you don't know what's going to happen in the tournament. That's kind of a wash. But Miles Powell coming back has the sole expectation of, he bypassed the draft and he came back and he said, I'm going to win the Big East Player of the Year and win the Big East. If you don't do that, if you don't win the Big East in his return, it's kind of a wasted year for Powell.
Oh, yeah, because his stock wasn't going to get any higher than last
year.
And kind of same with Marcus Howard, though, too. It's like, when was his stock going to get higher if he scored 28 points a game this year? We know who you are already. And so that both of those guys have the same exact thought where it's like, well, I guess it can't get much lower, though, either, is maybe unless he get hurt or just have Kevin Willard as your coach. So
they're pretty much stuck in their positions. Perfect. So let's go ahead and get started on our starting 5. But before we do that, a quick message from the Barn Burner Podcast Network. All right. Starting 5. I had mentioned this a little bit before, Taylor, but this is probably going to be my most enjoyable starting 5. It definitely was when prepping for this and doing my research because some of the names are just awesome. I could go down an absolute rabbit hole of every single original Big East team and their rosters. I'm talking like mid 2000s, late 2000s, early 2000s, even like 6 years ago. Some of these names are fantastic. So I'll start with you. Your starting five of Big East players.
Jeez, the Big East even has people that beat my favorite teams in like tournaments and stuff that I don't even hate, that I love, or at least loved in college. So there was some difficulty to this list though, because it was determining when these teams were actually in the Big East. I had scratched out a couple players that I had accidentally put on there, but their team had only joined the Big East the year after, or they had left the Big East the year before. So that was tough. So I do have two players on my list of teams that aren't in the Big East anymore, but they were in the Big East when they played. Excuse me. So, but I'm going to go with first. We've talked about this guy on this program before, and I'm going to go with my man Scotty Reynolds from Villanova. He is just the consummate, quintessential college point guard, big game point guard. Is there a school in the country, even right now today, that wouldn't benefit from having a Scotty Reynolds as their lead guard? No. Maybe Michigan State, right? That would be maybe the only team in the country who couldn't use someone like a Scotty Reynolds. And so that's what his big shot against Pitt there in the tournament was massive to get them to the Elite Eight. That was a great year for Villanova. I remember I was driving home from an Elite Eight game in Phoenix, watching a Hashim Thabit UConn team go to the Elite Eight that year, another Big East team at that time. So, but I'm going to go with Scotty Reynolds. I loved Scotty Reynolds in college. I think you did too.
Scotty Reynolds was awesome, man. Scotty Reynolds, the way I would put it is he ran so that Jalen Brunson could walk.
Right. No, there isn't this current Villanova success without a guy like Scotty Reynolds, not setting it up, but kind of creating that atmosphere for the future guards. Yeah, right.
Huge contributor.
He was the first, I would say the first guy to really say, like, this is for Jay Wright to say, like, this is what we do, and we're going to do it over and over and over again every year. And so that's kind of Scotty Reynolds is even though he's not that old of a guy, he is kind of one of the pillars of the Villanova basketball program, in my mind.
Certainly. I mean, if there was a guy that you were to build a statue of outside of the stadium that wasn't on the most recent championship team, it's Scotty Reynolds.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. So next on my list is a guy that I loved when he was in college and really thought highly of when he got to the NBA as well. He's super versatile, and that's Otto Porter Jr. from Georgetown. I love an absolute, like, versatile, play all five positions in college. Not all five, maybe four.
Pretty much everything positions. But point guard.
Just to do everything. Swiss Army knife. Otto Porter is like 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", maybe even. He could knock down a three. He's not like a prolific shooter by any means, but he could knock it down. He was a decent passer, good defender, and he played a lot of positions for that Georgetown team. I was really high on him when he came out of the draft. He was drafted number three overall. I'm still a believer of him in the NBA as well. But I just loved Otto Porter Jr. in college.
I think Otto Porter still has a nice niche in the NBA. I think he's on the Bulls now. Either the Bulls or the Wizards. I forget which team he's most recently on. Also looks like Lionel Richie has that going for him as well. But the best thing Otto Porter ever delivered to me, and it wasn't necessarily him by himself, but it was that Georgetown team that lost to Florida Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
He was on that Florida Gulf Coast losing Georgetown team, and I can't thank him enough for choking in that game.
Right. There's so many reasons you can put people on these lists. He is on the Bulls now. He was on the drafted and played for the Wizards for the previous 6 years before that. Think about that. 6 years, Otto Porter Jr. has already been in the NBA.
Crazy.
But he was a consensus first-team All-American at Georgetown, and he was the Big East Player of the Year. I really loved him in college. So other people I was going to have on my list when I instantly thought of this were like Dwayne Wade, which obviously wasn't in the Big East at that time. Terrence Williams was a guy I had on the list too. But Louisville was not in the Big East on that time. That was the one guy that we just missed by a year. But so one guy that I did go with of a team that isn't in the conference anymore. We have to go way back a little bit here, and that's Hakeem Warwick for Syracuse. I loved Hakeem Warwick, and he's in a way you could argue he's very similar to Otto Porter. In today's world, Hakeem Warwick would leave after his sophomore year and be drafted in the first round. He was a 4-year player at Syracuse, won Big East Player of the Year, and what made the key block in that national championship game with Carmelo Anthony, again, just a long, versatile, athletic, small forward that you could slide him to the 2, you could play him at the 4, you can knock down outside shots, you can play defense. Really loved Hakeem Warwick.
You know what's awesome about Hakeem Warwick and specifically that shot block? And we talk about all these tournament plays that you'll see in a montage highlight, right, before the actual tournament starts, or even before a Saturday CBS game with Jim Nantz. They have these incredible, iconic, memorable plays. And everyone remembers Carmelo Anthony winning that national title as a freshman. You won't see Carmelo Anthony's pretty much anything in that montage. Maybe him holding the trophy. But what you will see is Hakeem closing out like an absolute psychopath in the corner and making one of the best, greatest defensive championship level plays you will ever see. I truly don't think that play, because it's not as sexy as a Zion dunk, it's not as cool as a wet 3-pointer from Steph Curry. That play does not get enough love as it should in terms of what college basketball and how you win college basketball games. It's plays like that and it won them a championship.
100%. And that's every team, again, would be better with a guy like Hakeem Warwick on it. Now, for my next pick, this guy's he didn't spend a lot of time in the Big East, and I may have picked him only on his name alone. But I have a question for you, Subi, and that is, how can you be Mo Harkless?
Oh, wow.
So I went with Mo Harkless here as my 4th pick. Another versatile player, as we're seeing here in this. He's a little more of a big man than everybody else, but he's not big in stature compared to everybody else. For his freshman year, he was the Big East Rookie of the Year, 6'7", 220, born in New York, went to school in New York, just kind of your classic New York Big East basketball player, tough, gritty. That team wasn't really, none of these St. John's teams are really that good, but simply because of his name alone and the fact that he was really good in conference, we averaged 16 points a game at St. John's, and that was, how can you be Mo Harkless?
Mo Harkless, man, I'm happy for him. He was kind of wallowing away in Orlando. Then he got traded to the Blazers. They obviously went to the Western Conference Finals last year, and he played a pretty pivotal role. Now he upgraded to potential championship aspirations with the Clippers. So quite a glow up there.
He fits that Clippers team just perfectly.
He is. You want to talk about a guy like Scotty Reynolds and Hakeem Warwick, who you want on your college team? I want Mo Harkless on my NBA team.
Well, if you look, he wasn't that heralded, say, as even just a college player, but there's a reason that this dude has stuck it out for 7+ years in the NBA. This is a type of guy that you look at, and after like 15 years, you go, man, Mo Harkless is still in the league, but he's still there averaging like 8 and 5 off the bench in 20 minutes a game, like he has his entire career. And he will continue to do that because his game isn't based on being a more super athletic than anybody or be more skilled than anybody. He's just a guy that knows his role perfectly in the NBA, and he sticks it out. Good defender, guy that's going to stick around in the NBA for a while. But Mo Harkless from St. John's was my 4th pick. And this one, Sue, my last pick, might be a little controversial for you. And if you hear a winter wind blowing in your ear, it might not actually be the weather. It might be Lance Stevenson standing next to you.
That's a fantastic pick.
And
why is that controversial? He was in the Big East, wasn't he?
Well, I'm just saying, not everybody loves Lance Stevenson, or even loved Lance Stevenson at his time in Cincinnati.
I love Lance Stevenson. That's a great pick.
Born ready, Lance Stevenson was supposed to be the second coming of New York basketball Jesus. It's the second coming of Sebastian Telfair, really. He played for Cincinnati, was the Big East Rookie of the Year. He was in McDonald's All-American in high school. He was New York Mr. Basketball. He went to Abraham Lincoln High School in Brooklyn. This guy just screams New York basketball. And more than anything else, though, it's his personality. It's Lance can make you dance. It's his time with it's blowing in LeBron's ear. I know that's not college. I know, whatever. Get at me on Twitter if we don't agree with that I'm allowed to use his NBA antics for this list, but I'm going to. I did really love him at Cincinnati. He was a guy that I really wanted Sean Miller to recruit to Arizona because that was right at the time where that turnover in our program was happening. Sean Miller came from Xavier, a Big East Cincinnati area guy, and Sean Miller played for Pitt. And I'm like, oh man, let's get Lance Stevenson. Sean doesn't go for a lot of personalities like Lance Stevenson, so we didn't recruit him as hard as I wanted to. But there's just a lot of fun that you can have with Lance Stevenson on your court.
Man, I love that pick. Yeah. That might be my favorite one out of all the conference picks thus far because everyone knows about Lance's antics in the NBA. He was, I think he only spent 1 year at Cincinnati, but he was still such a clown. He was still such a clown at Cincinnati too.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, big clown. So this team is a legit squad, I think. We got, my Big Ten team sucked. They weren't winning any games. But this team with Scotty Reynolds, you're playing Lance Stevenson at the 2. You got Mo Harkless and Hakeem Warwick as your stretch 4s, and you have Otto Porter would have to play your stretch 5 in a college basketball setting. But from a college basketball standpoint, that's a really fucking good roster. Even from an NBA setting, in terms of players that have done anything in the league, right? Harkless, Porter, and Lance Stevenson have all contributed at some point. So of my roster, 4 of them were the freshmen of the year in the Big East Conference.
There you go.
I don't know what that means.
Pretty good.
But yeah. And then Hakeem Warwick was the player of the year his senior year.
And a national champion. Yeah. That's pretty damn good.
Not a lot of talent. A lot of talent on that roster.
Wait, so hold on real quick. Hakeem Warwick won Big East player of the year over Carmelo?
No. Hakeem won it his senior year in 2005.
Oh, so he wasn't a senior when Melo was on the team.
He was only a sophomore.
Shit, man. Yeah, you're right. Going back to your point about leaving early, he should have left the second he blocked that. Like the second his fingertips touched the ball, I'd be like, all right, I'm out.
Yeah,
the highest my draft stock's going to be.
His sophomore year, he averaged 15, 9, 2, 2, and 2.
It's not too shabby.
In today's world, he gone, and he's a lottery pick. But he stayed. Even his junior year, he averaged 20 and 9, and then his senior year, he averaged 21 and 9. And you're like, dude, that's nowadays you'd be like, go.
Yeah.
What are you doing? But there is also a reason why he stuck around in the NBA for so long, and that could be because he developed his game to such a high extent at Syracuse, and I think he's still playing now. He's in the G League now. I think he's one of those guys that now also won't leave.
Yeah,
like, dude, give it up.
It's clearly always been his problem going back to college. Didn't necessarily leave. All right, so let's see how my starting 5 stacks up with yours. I'm going to first and foremost start with some muscle, and that's not a figurative, speech right there. Legitimate muscle. I'm going to go with Craig Smith, center from Boston College. Growing up in the Boston area, BC, this was when they were good, man. Al Skinner, Jared Dudley, these guys were Final Four contenders, and then the wheels just completely came off once they got rid of Al Skinner. But Craig Smith was a monster. He looks like one of those huge goons that is a bouncer at the club. If you think DeJuan Blair had big arms, nothing compared to Craig Smith. Just your quintessential football player's body playing basketball. But every single time you play pickup with a football player, they suck. All they do is set screens and maybe get a rebound. Not Craig Smith. Craig Smith was an actual contributor to those Boston College teams who I grew up really watching. And He was from Inglewood, California. This was back when, yeah, man. He was absolutely up to no good. But this is going back to when Al Skinner in BC had a pipeline in Southern California. Him being from Inglewood, Jared Dudley being from San Diego. There were a lot of other recruits coming across the country.
It's just ridiculous. Why would you want to go to like
Skinner, man,
the snowy Northeast from LA when you've got literally every single other school in the country is between you and there? But hey, that's not hating. That's just maps. Look, it's just an atlas. Let's just look at an atlas.
It was the Al Skinner effect, man. He was just an absolute beast of a man. So Craig Smith, starting center. He is also my team security. He is getting me into different clubs, things like that.
That's perfect.
Yeah. After him, I'm going to go Dougie McDieselski.
Doug. A big consideration I had as well.
Love Doug McDermott, man. I need a shooter. I am just such a slut for shooters, and Doug McDermott is one of the greatest college basketball shooters of all time. He is one of the greatest college basketball scorers of all time. He's sixth in those rankings, and he played for his dad. I love those stories because we mentioned on last episode we have Steven Izzo playing for Tom Izzo. A lot of the times you see kids playing for their dads, but they kind of suck.
Yeah.
They don't do anything. Doug McDermott is probably the greatest basketball player in Creighton history. It's either him or like Kyle Korver, another great white shooter. But Dougie McDermott was appointment television, man. He was kind of like the college Steph Curry. You go on Twitter, and if Doug McDermott hits 3 threes in a row, no matter what game you're watching, you flip the channel to see what McDermott's doing. This is what we used to do with Steph before he broke his hand. Get better, big guy. But Doug McDermott earns a spot on my roster. After him, I'm going to go with Ryan Gomes. One of the most underappreciated Big East players in the entire conference. Silky smooth player at 6'7", could move well and averaged 8 and 9. He kind of reminded me of, or Otto Porter reminded me of Ryan Gomes when you brought up some of his numbers and his physical attributes. But Ryan Gomes on the block, man, when he would back you down and do a little fadeaway jumper, it was very, very pretty. He was the guy that really put Providence on the map for me personally. Providence had been on the map. I had referenced Dave Gavitt before. They went to a Final Four with Billy Donovan as a player and Rick Pitino coaching. But that was in like 88, 87, I forget. But
right,
watching basketball, it was Ryan Gomes. And watching him play in the dunk and then get drafted to the Celtics, Ryan Gomes was an awesome, awesome ball player. And he definitely earns a spot in Providence lore. So
100%. Great pick. I love that pick.
Love Ryan Gomes. After him, we're going to go a little comedy here. I could not leave off my boy Levance Puppy Dog Fields.
Man, I loved Levance Fields.
Levance Fields, a honorary member of the Van Wilder House. He was at Pitt for like 20 years. And
I just got thicker the whole time.
So short and stout. Man. Like just
it would take a hefty breeze to blow over Levance Fields.
And he just looked like a puppy dog. That was the funniest part, man. Especially when he had the long cornrows. And I was thinking about it. I was like, what kind of dog, like what breed of dog does he look like? And he looks like a Cavalier puppy.
Cavalier King Charles, huh?
That is what Levance Fields was. This has zero to, I mean, he was a good point guard too. Let's not walk over that fact. He was a really good point guard for those awesome Pitt teams with Jamie Dixon. But Levance Fields had to be on my team, but it led me down a rabbit hole. And I think we could do a starting 5 of hilarious Pitt basketball players' names.
Oh, 100%. It was something that I was doing leading up to the show.
I mean, we could just do it for fun. Like, we got to kill some time. I'm talking DeJuan Blair's easily the one that's more recognizable. But then you go down to like Sam Young. You go to Gilbert Brown.
Sam Young, who was 55 years old.
No, you know who was older? Carl Krauser.
Oh, wow. You got Brad Wanamaker, your boy.
Brad Wanamaker. Out of all these guys getting actually in the NBA, Ashton Gibbs, like.
Why can't I think of who Kemba crossed up?
Something McGee, Jermaine McGee.
Why can't I think about
that?
It's
something McGee. I know that if you Google it, and it begins with a J. So I'm so like I really just want to jump up and say JaVale McGee, but it's not.
JaVale McGee. Why can't I think of his name?
I thought you were looking it up.
I am. This is really
not
bad.
Jermaine?
This is really bad of me. What was that? 2011.
I'm just gonna say McGee Kemba crossover. I'm hoping there are listeners right now going like screaming at their heads. Gary McGee.
Gary McGee. Christ. Yeah, Gary McGee.
I was wrong.
Even that team alone had Brad Wanamaker. It had Ashton Gibbs. It had Trayvon Woodall.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, and that wasn't even that long ago.
No, that was actually, I think, the first year that Butler got to the national title game, or maybe the second. But
that's correct.
Butler beat them.
Yes, correct.
So had to go with Levance Puppy Dog Fields, and then I'm going to round it out with arguably the greatest postseason collegiate basketball player ever, King Kemba Walker. What do you say about Kemba, man?
Well, I only kept him off my list because I knew one of us was going to put him on the list.
I'm glad you kept him off your list because I was going to go with him regardless, dude. Despite the fact that he broke our hearts in the Elite Eight, I had so much fun watching Kemba Walker do what he did in the postseason. That UConn team, like every other UConn national champion, sucked going into the postseason, and then they just turned it on.
What did they win, 9 in a row?
They had to, I think so. They had to win the Big East tournament to get a bid. Yeah, that's exactly what Kemba Walker did. Thank you, by the way, for that segue with Gary McGee, because that was the Big East title game in Madison Square Garden. It doesn't get bigger than that. I said that at the top of this program. You talk about coming up clutch and carrying a team on its back. It's Kemba Walker. At least like Shabazz Napier, that championship team, he had Jeremy Lamb along with him. Kemba, he had some help, but Kemba Walker was the reason why that UConn team won a national title. And the thing with Kemba is that he has a signature move. He has a signature move that everyone knows, and it's that Gary McGee shot. It's in the Garden, and he capped it off with a title. The only thing that he doesn't have, though, is a signature move in the NCAA tournament. I feel like people forget that his shot against McGee was just to win the Big East title. But Kemba Walker, man,
hold the phone.
Oh, am I being checked?
That was in the quarterfinals.
I thought that was to win the title.
No, that was in the quarterfinals.
Jesus Christ.
So they still had to beat Louisville in the final that year, too. And that Louisville team was sick as well. I mean, it was really good. Yeah, so that wasn't even in the final. That's how crazy that was. They played. That's how bad they were. They played the number 3 team in the country, Pitt, in the quarterfinals of the tournament.
You've got to be kidding me, man! UConn is.
Then they had to beat Syracuse, and then they had to beat Louisville.
That school is. They just have a golden spoon stuck up their ass.
So they beat number 22 Georgetown, number 3 Pitt, number 11 Syracuse, and number 14 Louisville to win the ship. Do you want to shout out Alex Oriaki while we're here?
Oh yeah, Alex Oriaki, baby, Lowell player. Little story for the theater goers. I was on a team that beat Alex Oriaki in 8th grade. One of the greatest upsets, but we're not going to get down that rabbit hole. This is for Kemba Walker. Thank you for that fact check, because I definitely thought it was the Big East title game.
Well, it's really proclaimed as such if you watch it in the basketball highlights. When they say UConn wins the Big East, they always show that. They didn't show that was literally just the quarterfinals.
Right. Wild.
It's like showing a walk-off home run in the ALDS of a team that eventually wins the World Series. Obviously, it's different in a one-game college basketball setting, but it's crazy that that's how highly that is looked back at. It's because if they didn't have that, it's almost like was it Kawhi's Big Three?
Yeah, against the
Sixers last year, where it's looked upon so highly now because without that, they don't go on to win the NBA championship.
That's actually another good rabbit hole that we can get into real quick. Some of the other examples of that are the 1980 U.S. hockey team beating the Soviet Union, was in the semifinals, I think.
Yeah.
And then even if you think of like three of the Red Sox titles. You got that David Ortiz grand slam against the Tigers. Nobody remembers shit against the Cardinals in the World Series. And then you also have the
04 where we also don't remember where we also don't give a shit about the Cardinals in the World Series. Right. Or then you've got 07 when they swept the Rockies in the World Series. So nobody really gives a shit about
the World Series.
I guess really. And actually this year's a good example. Shout out to Washington Nationals for winning it this year. But if the Astros would have won this World Series, and we'd have just thought about Jose Altuve's home run in the ALCS.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy. These are all very good examples, but that's my big five, my starting five, Craig Smith, Doug McDermott, Kemba Walker, Levance Puppy Dog Fields, Ryan Gomes. And then I got to get some honorable mentions in real quick. Fab Melo, RIP, former Celtic, former Syracuse guy, just a big, goofy motherfucker. I don't know how he was effective, but he was. Then I'm going to go Marcus Williams. Those UConn teams were funny. Laptop Thief, Hashim Thabit, who you mentioned, and AJ Price. I don't know why I really liked watching AJ Price play. Sticking with Connecticut real quick, Denham Brown. The only reason I have him on the team is because of the long sleeve shirt. And they also need to bring back those uniforms. They don't say UConn, they say Connecticut all across the front. Very clean. And then very, very last one, Lazar Hayward from Marquette.
I almost took Jeff Adrian from those UConn teams as well. Just big dude. Yeah. So I was fortunate to be able to watch that Hashim Thabit team go to the Final Four, which was pretty cool. But we really don't get to see a lot of Big East teams out here in not my neck of the woods, not our neck of the woods, out here in the West. So that was pretty fun to watch out here in Phoenix. And that was, 10, 11 years ago, however long it was now. But I really liked Hashim Thabit. Thought he was going to be a stud. Was very wrong on that in the NBA.
Memphis guys probably think that too.
Almost considered Emeka Okafor on this list as well. But
Josh Boone.
But clearly didn't. So
Josh Boone, Hilton Armstrong.
For a team that I actually absolutely despise because they're the exact opposite program that Arizona is.
Yep.
Where they only have national championship success. They haven't had tournament success in the last decade or two even at all. But when they go pretty much. They're winning. If they make the tournament, they're winning the national championship. That's it.
They will haunt you if they're like a 10 or a 7 seed going into the tournament because you're like, well, it is UConn. They could very well go. They won a national title with Kevin goddamn Ollie. Like, that is all you need to know.
Do you remember that time period where people were talking about how good of a coach Kevin Ollie was? And I was personally just sitting there screaming like, you need to recruit one of these players on the team. Like,
this was all
what is going on? Right.
Yeah.
And he was like being considered for even higher jobs in the country. Like, no, this dude doesn't have any idea what he's doing. Yeah. But
also, speaking of Jim Calhoun, real quick, another reason why I love Ryan Gomes is because he made Jim Calhoun lose his shit indirectly. Jim Calhoun was in a press conference and he was basically asked for the 1,000th time, like, why didn't you recruit Ryan Gomes after I think he torched UConn? And Calhoun, I think you know which interview I'm talking about, but at the presser, he was like, I fucked up. If you want to say I fucked up, I fucked up. So thank you for that moment indirectly, Ryan Gomes.
Beautiful. I like your starting 5. I think my 5 is beating your 5 on the court, though.
Oh, most likely.
Actually, I take that back.
Oh, no, I got Kemba.
Yeah, because you have Kemba. Yeah, because that's all that matters. It really Doug, whatever, doesn't matter. It could be you, me, the whore down the street, whatever. And as long as Kemba's there, then you're probably winning that game.
Absolutely. All right. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get to our interview with, you guessed it, the Providence Crier. We also got another special guest coming, Justin Hasgard, big Rhode Island guy. Take a listen. Want to thank Justin and Surrett again for coming onto the program, sharing some of their thoughts on the rivalry between PC and URI. Taylor, let's wrap this up with some hugs. Who you got?
So usually I try to stick with the conference that we're in to give my hug out. But today we're going to go to a personal hug, a hug that I've given out several times before in person, more than several times. We're going to give my hug to a guy who joins athletes like Derrick Rose and Zion Williamson, who have torn their meniscus. And that is my father, Big Edward P. Damble, who had surgery on his torn meniscus this morning at Fairbanks Memorial Hospital in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Hey, man, speedy recovery, Ed. That is something that they all have in common. Absolutely.
I think every athlete has actually torn their ACL, but I'm just going like with the most athletic people that I could think of. And I'm going to bet you in 6 to 8 weeks, Edward P. Damble will be in better physical condition on his comeback train than Zion Williamson will be. Noted. You heard it here.
You might be right, man. Shout out, Ed, speedy recovery. I'm actually going to give a personal hug as well to Mike Surratt, who we just had on. We had mentioned it, new podcast he launched called the Providence Crier Podcast right here on Anchor. So get your fix of PCP, Providence Crier Podcast. You can get that with Surratt. So hug for you, Mike Surratt. You're going to enjoy his content during the season. Next up, T, we got the Pac-12, dude, and that's it. And then we're right into the season.
Well, and we all, luckily for us, we have some big Pac-12 news to share in terms of our previews about how the conference is going to go. And It's going to make us look a lot less like homers, which I'm super excited about. So
take care. Have a great weekend. We will see you next time here on Theater and College Hoops.